Agriculture Committee this morning. We will be doing a work session on House Bill 396, an act exempting meat and meat food products slaughtered and prepared in state for sale in state from certain inspections. And I'd like to first start by Pledge of Allegiance led by Representative Kenny.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So thank you for coming in. I know we're just looking at this one retained bill, but it's a very, very important bill nonetheless, and bears a lot of good discussion, especially as we have an amendment being presented by Representative Comtois. And to that end, I would like this work session to begin with Representative Comtois explaining this amendment and going over the parts that are, all of the parts that are making changes to the underlying bill. Good morning, Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Representative Aaron. Madam Chair, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
So when we had our last work session on this, I tried to listen to what everyone had to say because we were concerned about certain things. We were concerned that it was open-ended, that, you know, so I limited the number that could be processed on a monthly basis. I then also put in a disclaimer on page 2. I think page 2, well, it's actually page 3 at the end, is really important, and I think it incorporates some of the stuff that people thought was really important, where it says that any farm that slaughters and butchers its own beef, cows, swine, sheep, or goats under this chapter with intent to sell the meat in intrastate commerce, that's very important, shall register with the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Foods. A representative of the farm shall sign a statement in such registration acknowledging that by not processing its own beef, cows, swine, sheep, or goats at a USDA facility, the farm is violating federal law and could be subject to prosecution. So I thought that's something that we all wanted in there so they could understand the implications of doing this. And basically what I did is I looked at couple of the different things. We have rabbit poultry, we have other bills, but I looked at the we did a in-depth over a couple sessions of bison, elk, and red deer, and felt that this fit better under that section. So I just incorporated and added beef, cows, swine, sheep, or goats into that section of law. So it refers to it, you know, it has to do with labeling that we discussed, you know, obviously adding in that they had to register with the Department of Agriculture is something that isn't, I don't think is under the existing, so we have that there. You know, we have that disclaimer. And so it references a lot of the RSAs for labeling. So 143, RSA 143 has to do with food safety, where RSA 427 has to do with the Department of Agriculture. But just, and again, limiting the number. So that's it in a nutshell. Yes. But if anyone has any questions, suggestions, you know.
Representative Bixby, and then Representative Minor.
So I've got a couple of questions, or a couple of concerns. One is that a number of the paragraphs that we had in the red deer, elk, and bison seem to be struck, and one of them I actually really agree with a lot, which is on the bottom of page 2, going up to page 3, subsection C, that changing the slaughtering from September 1st to April 30th to requiring refrigeration no more than 12 hours after the time of slaughter. I think that makes a huge amount of sense.
Can I speak to struck items.
Sure.
So it was not my intent to strike everything in that section. My intent was to not require the amenable species to be adhere to those particular sections. And I think they may have misunderstood that, but like I said, I got this back at 4:00 yesterday, so.
Okay, so unless those conditions for the bison, elk, and red deer go back into place, I can't support it.
I would want those to go back into place.
Okay,
So I apologize. Like I said, I got this back late yesterday afternoon. Didn't have a chance to look at it till late last night. But it was never my intent to strike those sections.
okay, and in fact, I think it would make sense even for the amenable species to have that herd health check. Okay, so particularly important to not be struck is J, because that it covers some fish and game laws as well that prevent the importation of red deer and elk from places that might have chronic wasting disease.
Right. And when I sent this over, because like if you look at H, Madam Chair, do you mind that we have this
Go right
discussion?
ahead,
Thank
that's
you.
fine.
When bison, elk, or red deer meat is ground for sale, I didn't want that struck. I just did not want amenable species included in ground meat.
Okay,
That was the intent of my amendment, not to strike, but to add into the sections that say the amenable species, just in those sections, but not strike anything else.
okay. So are you good or not good with ground meat from the amenable species?
I'm not sure. I'm
Okay.
be open for
I
discussion.
I think that
I was looking at specifically cuts of meat.
right. I think that we could. I think we not having the ground meat for the amenable species would provide some risk reduction.
I believe so too.
So I think it sounds like you're on top of getting that part fixed with OLS. The other question I had was in terms of having the waiver filed with the Department of Agriculture, and I think that perhaps the commissioner can speak to this to the whole group. But in a previous conversation with him, he was not happy with the department having to do something that is explicitly in contrary to federal law, and if that waiver were to be something that could be notarized and required to be on file with the farmer rather than something that we would put on a State Department, I think I'd be more comfortable with that. So.
I would be more than happy to do that.
And so, because basically, I don't want any part of this bill to require any State Department to enact any part of it.
Okay. So at the bottom of page 3 with respect to 5, so you don't want them to register. You just want, we strike the first sentence and then have a notarized.
Right, so.
On file.
Signed, notarized, on file.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Okay, Representative Minor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a statement as opposed to a question. I've sent some of you a little blurb on Joel Salatin, who's working at this whole processing at a federal level. It's very interesting, and it's starting to take not only is the wave building in New Hampshire, but it's also building at the federal level.
Thank you. Well, I know that they've been trying to get the Prime Act passed, and
That's
there are
exactly.
some elements in there that are very pertinent to what we're looking at here.
Exactly what I'm speaking
Yeah,
about.
absolutely. Representative Gruber, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for all the work on this. I think it's going in the right direction, and I'm supportive of the concept. There's a few areas I just noted that I have some concern with. And on page 2, line 11 and 24, it refers to the statement, this product slaughtered at the farm and is exempt from federal inspections. I don't know if we should pass a law that that we could say you're exempt from federal inspections. We don't have that authority. So my proposal is that perhaps replacing the word exempt is does not include, rather than trying to say you are exempt from federal inspection there.
Already,
Representative Comtois.
thank you, Madam Chair. Already in law, it already says that on the non-ornamental species are exempt from state and federal inspection. So that we already do exemptions regarding that.
Follow-up question.
Representative Maria.
I understand that, but with adding cows and other items, can we say they're exempt from federal inspection in the law? Or should we say they do not include federal inspection?
I think the word exempt is important.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Good morning.
Representative Scully, good morning.
Thank you again for all your efforts regarding this important issue. I was going to make one suggestion, and that is on page 3, line 34, line 33, apologies. It's violating federal law and could be subject to, I thought it might be good to specify that they could be subject to federal prosecution to basically make it clear that the state of New Hampshire is not coming after them.
Absolutely.
Very well. Any other questions or comments?
I would be
Representative
fi-
Bixby.
I would be fine with that change.
Yeah, I would
Thank
as
you,
well.
Peter. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
I just wanted to, in lieu of everything that's been going on, and I have been alerted that we're now down to, and I haven't double checked this, so this is what I received some information that we may be down to only 3 USDA facilities now because one has been forced to close.
Oh, that's troubling. Any other questions or comments regarding this? Representative Bixby.
I know the department has some concerns about this. If the commissioner would like to speak, I think we should give him that opportunity.
Sure, absolutely. And I apologize for the very long commute that you had to come here this morning.
I did have some difficulty finding my way here. For the record, I am Sean Jasper, Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Markets and Food. I'm not going to pull any punches this morning. I'm just going to start out by pretty much saying I am a bit horrified by what you're attempting to do here. My department is largely about consumer protection, and I think this is a huge step in the wrong direction for a number of reasons. Start off by saying that the Prime Act has been trying to be passed by Congress since 2017. To the best of my knowledge, it has not. I will tell you that what the USDA has said in the past, particularly to the state of Maine when they were trying to do something similar, was if you do this, we will pull out all federal inspections in the state. Some may say, well, we have a different administration, but I would remind you that this administration is working towards the Make America Healthy Again, and they're looking at concerns within the food chain, and they are banning a number of things. This is not a step towards making America healthy again or protecting consumers. You have absolutely no safeguards for the consumer in this bill, even if you put back in the sections, which I agree should be put back in there, because unlike poultry and rabbit, there's no sanitary inspection requirements. Anybody can do this wherever they want. And I'm sorry if you believe that all people act in the best interest of sanitary conditions. I'd ask you to follow some of my inspectors around for a day or two. Some of you may say, well, look what happened with Boar's Head down south. That was closed down, people died. So what does that do? Well, I wonder how many of you realize that that was a state inspected program. That was not federally inspected. The only way that they were allowed to reopen was if the state allowed the federals to take over the inspection of the Boar's Head plant. I said right from the beginning, I have absolutely no information to this, but as I first read that story, I said, there has got to be corruption involved here because there were so many years of things going on. And then I found out it was a state program. This is giving no oversight to anybody at all. And while it is true that right now the law says is exempt from federal inspection, do you know why that is? Because under the federal law, those non-amenable species are exempt. You can't add these new species in and say it's exempt. You're not giving the consumer any idea that they are buying meat that is not falling under the federal protections of food safety. Why was this enacted? I don't know if any of you read my column back sometime early in the year called The Jungle. Many of you are probably aware of Upton Sinclair's book about the meatpacking industry, which led to the federal regulation because of the number of illnesses and deaths that were occurring. So, I don't actually mind registering with this particular statement, because at least then somebody within the state of New Hampshire would know who was doing what. If you simply have somebody sign it, notarize it, and file, nobody's even going to know it's there. There at least would be a way here. My objection originally was that we were going to do the same thing as was being done with rabbits and poultry. And that would included a course at Cooperative Extension on food safety, which is obviously out of the bill here. But I think somebody within the state needs to know who's doing what, not somebody then later having to search for it. So I don't object to the way it's written, because it's not saying I approve of anything, and it's specifically saying it's in violation. But I will tell you that unless the labeling, says that it is not exempt from federal regulation, this is a huge problem for consumers. I haven't heard anything about another facility closing. That would be troubling, but it would also indicate that there's not enough business to make what's going on viable. But I don't think we should be sacrificing food safety. I think it's very important to follow the federal law. I think that, somebody could be subject to prosecution, and I think that's good to know that they know that. I will tell you how that can go. Just a brief story. So my great uncle Joseph Jasper was a chiropractor practicing in Massachusetts around 1920, in the early 20s, and it was illegal, and he was doing so, under, outside of the law in Massachusetts. Well, he was a young chiropractor, 2 young children at the time. This was a collective decision on the part of the chiropractors in Massachusetts. They said, hey, you're young, you've got 2 kids, you'll be our test case. You go out there and openly practice. So Joseph Jasper did. Joseph Jasper went to jail. When he got out of jail, he moved to New Hampshire and eventually became the chair of the Board of Chiropractors in New Hampshire. But, I'm glad to see that you're not doing this without the intent of people to know that they could be prosecuted for this. And I think they will be, but I do think you would also be putting our whole meat processing at risk. The way to do this is through getting our congressional delegation to back the Prime Act and have certain sanitary conditions in place. I understand why you want to do this, but I think this is absolutely the wrong way to do it. And I will continue to make my opinions known. And I'm glad to take any questions.
Representative Bixby?
Yeah, so in a discussion we had a few weeks ago, you mentioned that there is a possibility for a facility that has the annual inspection by USDA as a custom exempt facility to request on a intermittent basis a inspector to come in and inspect and be present for or do the inspection on a slaughter, uh, just not not like every day, but coming in like once a month or something.
I have spoken with the USDA person, who I don't remember the title now, about what is required. And their obligation is to come in, whether you do one animal a year, one animal a week, whenever, they will come in and provide inspectors. Of course, we don't have a federal government operating right now, so, this is sort of speaking in normal times. And from talking with people in the state, there's a couple differences. You have to provide an office for the inspector, which makes sense. And the facility is, I've seen, they don't have windows. They're not looking into the facilities. You just have to have an office because they have to have records there and they have to have a workstation. So they need an office. They also need to have a plan, which I understand can be difficult to get the plan in place. And that was is it East Conway's, was one of their difficulties, is complying with the plan, but they did so. So anybody can do that. I'm sure there are samples of doing that. But yes, if you are already being inspected by HHS and you want to move forward, you can do that. Those are two of the primary issues. And the administrator told me he has literally thousands of these facilities all across the United States. It is not something that is difficult to do. It's just something that I think there is resistance on the part of people to doing.
Anyone else? Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have to admit, this is, try as I can't frame it as a question. It's a comment. I just wanted to say I appreciate you pointing out the labeling issue. I understand where Representative Comtois is coming from. I think that Representative Gruber raised this point obviously earlier. And I looked it up just before you explained it to us. The fact is that the non-amenable species are in fact exempt. So that labeling is accurate. But I would think that the labeling in this case would have to, whatever that alternative wording is, we can't give people the belief that this is exempt in the same way that the non-amenable species are. So thank you for that clarification.
Representative Minor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we spoke earlier, I guess it was last time we met in September. We spoke about a qualification that a person that would be doing this processing would have to have insurance, and that it would protect the consumers from a lot of liability. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think that you will find an insurance carrier anywhere who is going to cover anybody for an activity which is in violation of federal law. So I don't think you could possibly get insurance for this, but I think that would be a big problem if you can't, because you're going to put everything you own at risk. And if I may, I wanted to make clear that everything that is has been struck out on page 3 of the amendment needs to be there if you decide to move forward with this. And I think it should apply to every species. And I certainly think that J has been pointed out that really needs to stay in place, but I don't see why you wouldn't want some protections by having the herds looked at annually and a listing of that. So
Representative Scully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Thank you for being here. As a newer member, I'm afraid I don't have all the knowledge base that a lot of you have, so I'm going to ask some very basic questions. Does your commission inspect meat packing plants?
we do not. That is under USDA. For those who do custom exempt, they are inspected by the Department of Health and Human Services.
So if we wanted to go forward with trying to basically secure our food chain or food supply locally, Would the solution to your health concerns be, at the risk of growing government, adding some state level inspectors who could look at these types of facilities to make sure that things are being done correctly?
Well, I think that I don't know how many would be doing this. I think you would want to, at a minimum, just continue to do what HHS is doing. I don't think you need to add another level of bureaucracy. But the problem becomes, this issue of violation of federal law, and whether the commissioner would say, all right, well, we'll inspect them and say they're sanitary for doing this, not giving a blessing to do these types of slaughter outside of custom exempt, because certainly anybody who wanted to do this at a very minimum should still be able to do it custom exempt. If you can't meet the standards for doing custom exempt, you shouldn't be then just saying, oh, well, we're not going to do anything for you, but we'll do something for all of you without having any inspections. I mean, I hope you understand what I've just said there, but yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Howard, good morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. And good morning, Commissioner. I don't know if this question is for Representative Comtois or for you, Commissioner Jasper, or both. But is there a shortage of inspectors that's gumming up the works, and that's why this has come before us?
I have never heard that there is, because in talking with the administrator, their obligation is to find people, and I have never been aware that anybody has, I suppose on occasion a last minute snafu could occur where somebody didn't show up, but that is certainly not anything I've heard as being a common problem at all.
But Commissioner, if I may chime in here, isn't it true that because there's such a shortage of USDA facilities, and I would imagine as a result a few less inspectors, we are having a situation where our farmers have to make appointments for slaughter of animals that have not even been born yet, because they just don't have the time or the facilities to accommodate the amount of people that want to have slaughter done.
So thank you for that question. And the answer to that question is really quite different than you might think. And I have talked to the beef producers of the state of New Hampshire going back 3 or 4 years about this. The real problem is that a number of people do not want to overwinter their animals. If you are running any business with full-time employees, and I don't really care what it is, you have to have business 12 months of the year to keep your business running. So what's happening is that there are times when none of these small producers want to put animals into the market. They don't want to have them slaughtered. Therefore, the slaughter facilities that we do have to scale their business to what they can do at the slowest time of the year, essentially. So that there may be animals out there all summer into the fall that people want to get slaughtered, but there's no scale that allows that to happen. And what I've suggested to the beef producers is, look, what you have to do is you have to realize that you are going to have to put animals into the system 12 months of the year. And that could mean 5 farms getting together, 10 farms getting together and saying, we will book these dates. One a month, 2 a month, whatever it is, but it's got to be 12 months a year. I personally know a number of small producers, many of them are fraternity brothers of mine, Alpha Gamma Rho, which is the National Agricultural Fraternity. They have no problem getting dates because they recognize they have to supply those facilities with an animal on a regular basis. So they have no problems getting dates. They have monthly dates, But if you think you're going to come into the market and you have 3 animals a year that you want to put in and you're not working with anybody else, yeah, you're going to have to book that out in advance, or you're going to have to wait for a date when somebody cancels.
Well, doesn't that cause a problem for our smaller farm operations? I mean, if they only have 3 a year, that becomes kind of a discriminatory thing even for our smaller farmers and their smaller operations.
Well, I think that is true of anything. You know, if I want to put my vehicles into my service provider, he knows that I'm coming in on a regular basis, that I'm not one and done. And that's why I've suggested and recognized what you're saying is that you have to get people together. If there are all these people having problems, they need to work through Farm Bureau or through the beef producers and say, let's match up things. Let's work on this. You can't just say, well, we're going to forget food safety because you have these people who want what they want when they want it. That is not the way food safety works. And so I think the solution is very workable and very reasonable, to simply work together and to get the animals scheduled. And, you know, if there are then more animals out there than you think, then the slaughterhouses will scale up and say, okay, we now know that we're going to have more animals in, we'll have more people working in. And it's really, and from what I'm hearing, that's not as much the problem. There's more availability on the kill floors, which then could go to places where they could cut the meat, because as long as they're expected by HHS, if the animal comes in, they're willing to have it inspected and halved, and then you can take it off to a facility, and that's what many people do now. So I would urge you not to sacrifice food safety because people want what they want. That's just not a reasonable way to handle our food supply.
Representative Minor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, again, you mentioned Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle. I don't think there's any comparison with what we're trying to do here with The Jungle. There's no poor sod Urgus that's looking for a job, no matter what it is. I think food safety hasn't been thrown out the window. I think, in fact, we're trying to do something that promotes food safety and also makes food more available at a local level.
I would ask you the question, where in this bill does any of that take place? You're not talking about any type of inspections. You're not talking about any type of courses. You're talking about somebody can do this slaughter with no regulation at all. And so you don't know if they're, you know, slaughtering on a garage floor and just cutting it up on the garage floor. You don't know what's going on here. As I've said, you know, it's unfortunate to think and to know that there are many people out there who will do whatever they want to if they think nobody is watching. That is the reality of my life and my inspector's life every day that we come to work.
Representative Minor, follow up.
Follow up, thank you. But what I would say is, I think if you know your local farmer and know how they work, know what they produce, I don't think you're going to see a lot of cows or sheep or goat being processed necessarily on a garage floor.
Well, that's nice to think that, but there's nothing in here that says you can only buy the meat from somebody that you know and whose facilities you know. This allows that to happen. It allows it to go into restaurants. It allows it go, you know, into your local convenience store if you want. Nothing here. There's only the assumption on the part of the government, on the part of the people, that the government is watching out for the sanitary conditions, and there are no guardrails.
So to that end, I have a question to you. Are you aware of any USDA facilities in New Hampshire who have had multiple violations of what they do?
I have not. I would tell you that probably happens, and that's my concern, is even in those facilities, that probably happens. So think about what would happen if nobody is watching. If you have the fox watching the chicken house, or in this case, nobody watching the hen house, then think of what is likely to happen. And I tell you that as a regulator and somebody who, you know, as I said, we live it every day.
Okay. Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I find myself definitely kind of going back and forth through this conversation in my mind. I tend often to disagree with some of my friends on the committee about how much we can expect the market to regulate itself when it comes to some of these issues. But in terms of safety, I'm wondering about your thoughts. I really appreciate how much Representative Comtois has refined this bill. And part of it, to me, around safety is reducing the scale of slaughter, the labeling, which would help with tracing. And also, do you think, like with restaurants and other kind of food service establishments who are also deeply concerned about their reputation, their ability to do business in the future, do you think that those kind of issues, the scale, tracing through labeling, and the reluctance of businesses to risk their livelihood by going with someone that they don't trust, do you think that those things mitigate some of the safety concerns?
To a minor degree, but again, you know, seeing what goes on in this world and the shortcuts that people are willing to take in the hopes that they will be able to get away with something and that nothing will go wrong, I'm not sure that we as people in government have the right to take that risk on for people. That concerns me. This bill depends on the good actions of everybody out there who might take advantage of that. And my 65 years on this earth has taught me that you can't count on that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Representative Scully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, at the risk of asking you perhaps to repeat yourself, but your valid concerns aside for a moment, what would we need to do to ensure the level of safety that you would like to see at the state level? What institutions or processes would be necessary to ensure safety at the state level, federal issues aside?
Well, there's conflicting things here because of course, I'm very concerned about what happens to the industry as a whole if we violate federal law. Beyond that, I think that we need to ensure that everybody is meeting the standards, even if you want to say they're exempt, but they have to meet the standards that a slaughterhouse meets for USDA inspections. You know, there are state programs out there, but they have to meet the same standards. I've asked, you know, another commissioner why they have a state program, and they don't know. It was there when they got there because it just costs more money to the state or to the producer. But I think the standards are important. I don't think that anybody has ever said that the sanitary standards that are being required by the USDA program are unreasonable. I have never heard anybody who's operated a slaughterhouse say that.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Professor, Commissioner Jasper, is there an additional health risk to being able, if something were to go wrong, could there be a domino effect of tracking down the food that has come out of this a process that has gone wrong?
Well, sure, and think of your own household. You buy a piece of meat, it's wrapped, you unwrap it to cook it, you throw it away, trash days the next day. You don't have the label anymore and you become sick 3 days later. You go to back to the place you bought it, and they're pulling in animals from different places. The traceability could easily be gone. It's not something, and it may take a while for people to figure out why they became ill. So I am concerned about that. Traceability is certainly important, but that only works when people have, been very careful about keeping the information that certainly I don't. I don't know about the rest of you. I do not keep the labels from my steak.
Representative
I-
Howard, follow up?
Yeah, follow up, please. So and I'm sort of thinking in terms of not just me getting sick, but finding the other places that it's been sold, the other people that it's been sold to. Is it harder to do under this additional slaughtering than it is under the USDA inspected?
I'm not sure it would be any more difficult.
Representative Gruber?
Yes, Commissioner, thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you very much for your insightful knowledge of this area. I'm fairly a newbie on this area, but I'll ask my question anyway. So how can we as legislatures members support small farmers to navigate what appears to be a difficult current scheduling challenges to be able to use sanitary and inspected slaughterhouses? What can be done that could help? Because we hear there's a problem for small farmers. What can we do so they can become part of a system that's actually safe and inspected?
No, I never like to put things on other organizations, but I think this is an area where Farm Bureau could really be an important part of it. Again, there is a beef producers organization out there, and I think that I'm not sure this is a government solution. I think this is an industry solution where people need to work together in that industry and figure it out for themselves. I'm not a big fan of having a problem and saying government solve it for me. I'm more of a, hey, I'll figure out how to solve this. I'll get together with people. I'll find out who else are producing this, and we'll work together to find a solution. Because I do think that it's pretty much, people will scale up when they know, hey, I've got a steady supply. They'll scale up. They'll do what they need to meet the demands. And I think many of the slaughterhouses do have more capacity year round, but they're not going to have capacity only 6 months of the year.
Thank you.
To your point, though, that hasn't been happening. It hasn't been happening from the federal level to fix this, and it hasn't been happening from a state level from these organizations, the beef producers or Farm Bureau or even your department to facilitate that. And at the same time, we are having our constituents screaming at us that they need to have something done. And so I don't see that the status quo can go on. I think that we have to do something, if not make a statement about it. And that's kind of where, I am on this, is that nothing is being done. And so we've got to do something as a committee and as a legislature to make a statement that, hey guys, you either fix this in the industry, or you fix this at the federal government, or we have to. And as an intrastate solution, I think this is a good place to start. And that's what I'm going to say about it. Representative Minor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, let's just suppose that this was enacted and we actually got it through. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's going to be a lot of people jumping at the opportunity to sell people meat that wasn't processed properly. I guess that would be a question.
I would probably tend to agree with you because of the liability issues. But I'll also say, in my 23 years as a legislator, I've always heard people talk about, well, people want this, I get the demands. And I've said, well, how many phone calls did you get? And I don't know. I can tell you nobody's calling my office in the 8 years I've been in it about this. I've had discussions with groups and I've heard these stories. But I ask you, where are the people at the hearings who are telling the stories in great numbers? They're going to be people who are going to tell you stories, but why isn't Farm Bureau here saying this is a real problem? Aren't the beef producers here saying this is a big problem? So I'd ask you just to consider how many people have you actually heard from? Because I would expect I would be a person who would be hearing from people on a regular basis. And there are very few that I've heard from over the last 8 years.
Any other questions or comments? But I will say that I have gotten a number of emails about it. I have read on the social media for, farmers or whatever, a lot of chatter about it. There are quite a few people who are very interested in seeing something like this passed because they are having problems in being able to process their animals. So. Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been sitting here listening to the entire discussion, and I think traceability is an important issue, as Representative Howard spoke about. But my intent was for farmers to sell cuts of meat. So there are some sections in this where it talks about ground meat and things like that, which I don't really want to advocate for that. So I think that making it exclusively to cuts of meats helps with the traceability because you're not incorporating that into other things. The other thing that we're talking about with regards to traceability is on the bottom of page 3 and 4 is we're limiting each small farm, whoever wants to do this, to 3 beef cows, 5 swine, or 10 goat or sheep or a combination thereof. We're not talking about hundreds of animals from one place. It's a very limited number of animals that can be done on a monthly basis. So that also helps with traceability. The other thing is when we talk about restaurants aren't going to buy from people they don't know and don't trust because their livelihood is also on the line. I am more than happy to go and get an amendment redone, reinstating a lot of these things and putting into some of the things that we've talked about. I have no problem with that at all. But what we have to understand is that the USDA facility that I'm speaking about wasn't lack of inspectors, wasn't lack of meat. It was calling the USDA to have them go in and inspect a USDA facility that has someone on site that was processing and reselling freezer burned meat, white mold, and no air circulation in their freezers. And this has been going on for over a year. So it's not that we have an inspector on site with an office and that just cures all our problems. So we have to understand that there are issues when we have USDA facilities also. It doesn't mean that it's good meat. It can be tainted. I understand regarding the sanitary conditions, I would be willing to put something in there. But we also have to understand that if you're raising animals to sell as a farmer to a consumer, I would bet that over 95% of them are very concerned about their reputation. And as we spoke about in this committee, New Hampshire is a very small state, and one bad word about one farmer travels quickly, and it damages their reputation for a long time, if not forever. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments for the commissioner? Seeing none,
Well, thank you
I
very much.
thank you very much for lending your comments and opinion, and we appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak and the latitude in doing so.
Sure.
So thank you very much.
As always. Any other questions or comments, Representative Bixby?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention that since the commissioner is okay with having his department store those waivers, those affidavits, I would be, I don't have an issue there.
Thank you, Representative Bixby.
Representative Comtois, go ahead.
Madam Chair, would you like me to go over to OLS and see if they could draft an amendment this morning?
I don't, yes, that would be fine. I'm not sure whether the committee would be able to stick around for whatever time, if you would want us to recess, or if you would like us, if we as a committee would be okay with perhaps coming back next Wednesday to consider an amendment and do an exec session on it. Representative Bixby?
I would prefer to come back next Wednesday to exec because it's not clear how long it's going to take to do the amendments.
Correct.
And it will need at least one more review.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So why don't we plan then to I have a meeting 2:30 at the State House. So if it would be okay with the committee perhaps to schedule something at 11 o'clock next Wednesday on November 12th, would that be agreeable to whoever's here? Yeah? All right, so why don't we plan on another work session and an exec session for the subsequent changes to this amendment? And I want to extend my sincere appreciation to Representative Comtois to working on coming up with an amendment that everybody seems to be agreeable to. And I thank you for your work on this. So what I will do is schedule a meeting for November 12th, 11 o'clock for this committee, and I'm going to, unless there's any other comments, I'm going to close out this work session on HB 396. Thank you. See you next week. Yeah, we absolutely will. What?